good evening, and welcome. Wherever you are in the world tonight, and however you found your way here, I'm so glad you came. Maybe you're already in bed, with the blankets pulled up warm. Maybe you're winding down after a long, tiring day, or resting on a quiet journey home. Either way, there's nothing you need to do now. You don't have to concentrate or follow along, or remember anything at all. Just let your body settle, let your breathing slow, and let a calm voice carry you gently down towards sleep. Before we begin, I'd love to know one small thing. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? If you feel like it, leave a little note below to say hello and tell us where you are. There's something nice about picturing so many people all over the world settling into rest at the same time. And if these calm recordings help you unwind at the end of the day, a like and a subscribe help this small channel more than you'd think. It costs nothing, it takes a moment, and it means a lot on this end. So thank you for being here tonight, whether it's your first time or one of many. Now let me tell you where we are wandering this evening. Tonight, we are going to take a slow and gentle journey down into one of the last great unexplored wildernesses left anywhere on Earth. And it is not on some distant planet or out among the stars. It is right here, on our own world, hidden beneath the waves. We are going to descend ever so slowly into the deep ocean. We'll start at the bright and sunlit surface, and then we'll sink downward, floor by floor, into the fading blue, past strange glowing creatures and gentle falling snow, down through the cold and the dark and the crushing pressure, all the way to the very deepest trenches at the bottom of the sea, places so remote that, for a long time, fewer human beings had reached them than had walked upon the surface of the moon. I promise there will be nothing difficult here. No science to study, no long names to memorize, no test at the end. If anything, I hope this feels less like a lesson and more like being read a bedtime story. A slow, drifting tale about the strange and beautiful creatures and the vast hidden landscapes that lie beneath the surface of the sea. And if you happen to fall asleep somewhere along the way, long before we reach the bottom, please don't feel that you've missed a thing. That is exactly what this is for. It would be the kindest possible way to spend the night. So make yourself as comfortable as you possibly can. Settle deeper into the pillow. Let your shoulders sink, and close your eyes whenever they feel ready. Take a slow, easy breath and let it out. And let's begin our gentle descent down through the quiet water into the deep. Before we begin to sink beneath the waves, let's pause for a moment at the surface and take in just how much water there truly is. Because we call our home the earth, as though it were a world of soil and stone. But that is really rather a misleading name. Seen from far out in space, our planet is not brown or green at all. It is blue, a deep, shining ocean blue. If some traveler were to come upon our world from afar, they would not call it Earth. They would call it the water planet. The ocean covers very nearly 3/4 of the entire surface of our world. 3/4. If you could smooth the whole planet flat, water would cover almost everything, and the dry land where we live our whole lives, where every city and forest and mountain stands, would be little more than a scattering of small islands poking up through one vast, world-spanning sea. And it holds almost all of the water there is. Of every drop of water on the entire planet, every river, every lake, every raindrop and snowflake and glacier, very nearly all of it, more than 97 parts in 100, is held in the salty basins of the ocean. All the fresh water we drink, all the rivers and lakes we know, are just the tiniest sliver of the whole. And though we give the ocean many names, the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian, and the rest, it is worth remembering that they are not truly separate at all. They are all one. There are no walls beneath the waves, no borders drawn in the water. Every sea flows into the next, so that all the world's oceans are really a single, vast, connected body of water, wrapping right around the globe. One great world ocean, so joined together that a drop of water could, in principle, drift all the way around it. A current setting out from one coast might wander, over hundreds of years, through every ocean on Earth before returning home. It is all one sea, one enormous connected world-spanning ocean, upon whose surface we have simply drawn our lines and our names. But it is not just how much ocean there is, it is how deep it goes. When we stand at the shore and look out at the sea, we see only its skin, the flat, shining surface stretching to the horizon. We almost never think about what lies beneath, and what lies beneath is a world of staggering depth. On average, across the whole ocean, the water is around 3.5 kilometers deep. That is, if you could drain it all away, the seafloor would lie, on average, more than 3 kilometers below where the surface is now. Tall mountains could be sunk into the average ocean and vanish completely beneath the waves. And in the very deepest places, the ocean plunges down nearly 11 kilometers, deeper than the tallest mountain on Earth is high. If you could pick up Mount Everest, the highest peak on the planet, and drop it into the deepest trench in the sea, its summit would still be more than 2 kilometers underwater. That is how deep the deep ocean goes. And here is the thing that I find most astonishing of all, the thought that makes this whole vast realm feel like a true frontier. We have barely seen any of it. We have mapped the surface of the Moon and Mars and distant worlds in beautiful detail. And yet the floor of our own ocean, the largest single feature on our own planet, remains, to this day, mostly unknown to us. Only around a quarter of the seafloor has been mapped in any real detail. And as for actually seeing it, with our own eyes, or with cameras sent down into the dark, we have laid eyes on only the tiniest fraction of it, a sliver so small it is hard to believe. The vast majority of the deep sea floor, the largest living space in all the world, has never been seen by any human being, and very likely never will be. There are more detailed maps of the far side of the Moon than there are of the bottom of our own sea. So the deep ocean is not some small or distant thing. It is the largest wilderness on Earth, the biggest single habitat for life anywhere on our planet, and it lies almost entirely in darkness and mystery, right here beneath us. Tonight, we are going to lower ourselves gently into it. So let's leave the dry land behind and slip below the surface, into the bright and gentle waters at the very top of the sea. Let's begin our descent in the friendliest, warmest, most familiar part of the ocean, the thin, bright layer right at the top, where the sunlight still reaches. Scientists call it the sunlit zone, and it is exactly what it sounds like. The shallow surface waters, from the very top down to a depth of about 200 meters, where the light of the sun still filters down through the water and paints the sea in shades of blue and green and gold. This is the ocean we all know. It is the water you swim in, the water that laps at the beach, the water that sparkles under the summer sun. It is warm, or at least warmer than the depths below, and it is alive with light. And because it has light, it is bursting with life. Nearly everything we picture when we think of the sea lives here, in this thin, sunlit skin. The fish, the dolphins, the turtles, the coral reefs, the great schools shimmering and turning as one. This top layer is only a tiny fraction of the ocean's total depth, a mere 200 meters out of nearly 11,000. And yet it holds the great majority of all the ocean's familiar life, all crowded into that sunlit sliver at the top. And there is a reason for that, a reason that shapes everything about the entire ocean below, all the way to the bottom. It all comes down to the sun. In the sunlit zone, and only in the sunlit zone, there is enough light for tiny plant-like creatures to do the very same thing that grass and trees do on land, to drink in sunlight and turn it into food and growth. These creatures are mostly far too small to see, drifting in their countless trillions through the surface water, a living dust of tiny green specks. We call them the plankton, and though each one is minuscule, together they are the great green pasture of the sea. They are the beginning of nearly everything. The tiny plankton are eaten by slightly larger creatures, which are eaten by fish, which are eaten by bigger fish, and seals and whales, and on and on. Almost every living thing in the entire ocean, from the smallest shrimp to the greatest whale, depends, in the end, on those tiny sunlit plants at the surface, quietly turning sunshine into life. And it is here, in the warm sunlit shallows, that the ocean builds its most dazzling creations of all, the coral reefs. A coral reef is, in a way, a great living city, built up over thousands of years by countless tiny creatures, each no bigger than a grain of rice, every one of them laying down a little cup of hard stone, until together they raise vast and intricate structures of living rock in every color you can imagine. And these reefs, though they cover only the tiniest sliver of the sea floor, are among the most crowded and vibrant places in all the ocean, home to something like a quarter of all the kinds of creatures in the sea, a dazzling riot of fish and color and life. They are often called the rainforests of the sea, and like the rainforests, they brim with an almost unbelievable richness. But they too live and die by the light. The corals themselves keep tiny sunlight-drinking plants living within them, and so, like everything else up here, they can only raise their bright cities where the sun still reaches. And that simple fact holds the key to the whole journey we are about to take. Because sunlight cannot travel very far down through water. Water swallows light, drinks it in, layer by layer. The bright reds and oranges of the sunlight are absorbed first, near the surface, which is why, once you dive down even a little way, everything begins to look blue and dim. And by the time you reach the bottom of the sunlit zone, at around 200 meters down, almost all the light of the sun has been soaked up and lost. Below that, there is not enough light for those tiny plants to grow. And so, the great green pasture of the sea ends right there, and everything beneath it must find some other way to live. So the sunlit zone is like a warm, bright meadow floating on top of a vast, dark, unknown continent. It is the part of the ocean that feels like home. But we are not staying in the meadow tonight. We are going to sink below it, down past the point where the plants can grow, down to where the light begins to fail, into a strange, dim world that most people never even think about. Take one last look at the bright water, the sparkle of the sun on the waves. And now, let's sink slowly downward into the fading light. As we sink below the sunlit surface, past 200 meters down, we enter a region with the loveliest of names, the twilight zone. It stretches from around 200 meters down to about 1,000 meters, and it is exactly what its name suggests. A vast, dim, shadowy world of perpetual dusk. Here, the last faint traces of sunlight still filter down from above, but only barely. It is like the deep blue gloom of the very last moments of evening, just before all the light is gone. Except that here, in the twilight zone, that dusk never lifts, and it never darkens into full night either. It is a world held forever in the fading blue of twilight. There is not nearly enough light down here for any plant to grow, so there is no green pasture, no meadow of plankton. And yet the twilight zone is not empty at all. Far from it. In fact, it may hold more fish than all the rest of the ocean put together. Vast, uncounted multitudes of small, strange creatures hanging in the dim blue water. Many of them are little fish with rows of tiny glowing spots along their bellies. Many have enormous eyes, grown huge and sensitive to gather every last scrap of the faint light drifting down from above, the better to see in the endless dusk. It is a shadowy, quiet, crowded world, this twilight zone, full of watchful eyes and gently glowing bodies, all hanging suspended in the blue. And the twilight zone is home to one of the most astonishing events in all of nature. A great movement that happens every single day, all across the world's oceans, entirely in secret, beneath the waves. It is called the Great Migration, and it is, quite simply, the largest movement of living creatures anywhere on the planet. Here is how it works. Every evening, as the sun sets and the surface waters darken, countless billions upon billions of these small twilight zone creatures begin to rise. They swim slowly upward, out of the dim depths, up toward the surface, to feed under the cover of darkness on the rich sunlit zone life above. Safer to do so at night, when the dark hides them from predators. And then, every morning, as the sun returns and the surface grows bright and dangerous again, they all sink back down, retreating into the safe, dim shadows of the twilight zone to hide away for the day. Every night, up they rise. Every morning, down they sink. Billions and billions of creatures moving together in this slow, silent, vertical tide. The greatest daily migration of life anywhere on Earth, and one that almost no human ever sees, unfolding quietly in the dark water all around the world, night after night, as it has for millions of years. There is something wonderfully calming in that thought, isn't there? That right now, in the dark seas across the whole planet, this vast, gentle, rhythmic rising and falling of life is quietly taking place, as steady and as ancient as the tides themselves. And drifting down through all of this, always, is a soft and constant falling, a gentle snow. Not real snow, of course, but what scientists rather poetically call marine snow. A slow, endless drift of tiny, pale flecks, sinking down from the sunlit world above. These flecks are the crumbs of life from the surface, bits of dead plankton, scraps and specks of the living world up top, all slowly, gently sinking down into the deep. And this falling snow is precious, because it is food. It is the way that the energy of the sun, captured up in the bright surface waters, finally makes its way down into the dark, all through the twilight zone and far, far below it. This soft snow is always falling, feeding the creatures of the deep, drifting down and down like the quietest snowfall you ever saw. But to truly understand the creatures of this dim world and the darker world below, we need to talk about a kind of magic they possess, the ability to make their own light. Here is one of the most beautiful and surprising truths about the deep ocean, and it is worth settling into slowly, because it transforms the whole dark world beneath us into something magical. In the deep sea, where the sunlight cannot reach, a great many of the creatures make their own light. They glow. They sparkle and shimmer and flash in the darkness, with a soft, living light all their own. This ability is called bioluminescence, which simply means living light. And down in the deep, it is not rare or unusual at all. It is everywhere. It is the norm. In fact, if you are somehow able to descend into the deep ocean and watch, in the darkness, you would find that the majority of the creatures around you can produce their own light. Study after study has found that in the deep sea, most of the animals, by some counts, more than 3/4 of them, are able to glow. Think of that for a moment. Imagine a world where most living things carry their own gentle lanterns. The deep ocean is not, as we might imagine, a place of pure and total blackness. It is a place quietly sprinkled with living light, with soft glowing sparks and flashes and shimmering veils, drifting and pulsing in the endless dark. It is, in its own way, like a night sky turned inside out, the stars themselves alive and swimming. How do they do it? The light is made by a gentle chemical reaction happening inside the creature's own body. Two special substances mixing together to release a soft, cool glow, a light that gives off almost no heat at all. It is the very same kind of magic that lets a firefly glow on a summer evening, or a glowworm shine in a hedge. Some creatures make the light themselves directly. Others are cleverer still and keep tiny glowing bacteria living inside special pockets of their bodies, tending them like a living lamp and using their borrowed light as their own. And why do they do it? What is all this light for down in the dark? The answers are as varied and as wonderful as the creatures themselves. Some use their light to find one another in the vast darkness, a gentle signal, a beacon, a way of saying, "Here I am," to a mate across the empty water. Some use it to hunt. There is a famous fish, the anglerfish, that dangles a single glowing lure right in front of its mouth, a little living lantern on a stalk, to draw curious prey close enough to be caught. Some creatures use their light for defense, a sudden brilliant flash to startle and blind an attacker, buying a precious moment to escape into the dark. Some, when they are seized, release a glowing cloud into the water, a burst of light like a smokescreen, to confuse and dazzle a predator. And some use it in one of the cleverest ways of all, to hide. It sounds strange, to hide by glowing. But think about a creature hanging in the dim twilight zone, with the faint light of the surface still glowing above it. To a hungry hunter looking up from below, that creature would appear as a dark shadow against the lighter water above, an easy target. So some clever creatures glow softly on their undersides, on their bellies, with exactly the right gentle light to match the glow of the water above them. And in doing so, they erase their own shadow. They blend perfectly into the faint light from the surface and become all but invisible from below. They glow in order to disappear. So the deep ocean, which we imagine as a place of cold and lonely darkness, is in truth a living light show, a slow, silent, endless festival of glowing, flashing, shimmering creatures, each carrying its own soft lantern for its own quiet purpose. Hold that gentle image in your mind as we sink deeper. Not blackness, but a scattering of living stars. And now, let's talk about another sense entirely, For where the eyes fail, in the deep, there is another way to know the world. As we sink deeper, and the last of the light fades away, it's worth pausing to think about what it would actually be like to live down here, to make sense of a world with no light to see by. Because for the creatures of the deep, and even for those in the dim waters above, the eyes can only do so much. Light does not travel far through water, but there is something that travels through water beautifully, far better than it travels through air, and that something is sound. Here is a lovely fact to rest on. Sound travels through water more than 4 times faster than it travels through air, and it carries much, much farther. In the open air, a shout fades away within moments. But in the ocean, a sound can travel for enormous distances, across whole seas, across thousands of kilometers of open water, before it finally fades. The ocean, which seems so silent to us when we stand on the shore, is in truth filled with sound, alive with it, a vast dark world humming and singing and clicking with noise that carries on and on through the deep. If the deep ocean is a world of darkness for the eyes, it is a world wide open to the ears. And the creatures of the sea have made the very most of this, where we, land creatures, rely most of all on our eyes. The animals of the ocean rely, more than anything, on sound. The great whales are the masters of this watery world of noise. The song of the humpback whale is one of the most haunting and beautiful sounds in all of nature. Long, slow, mournful melodies, rising and falling, repeated and varied, that can carry for great distances through the deep. We are still not entirely certain what all the singing means, but it is clearly a language of a kind, a way of reaching out across the vast dark water to others of their own kind, far away. And some whales use sound not just to speak, but to see. The sperm whale and the dolphins and many other creatures send out sharp clicks of sound into the water, and then listen ever so carefully for the faint echoes that come bouncing back. From those returning echoes, they can build a picture of the world around them, the shape of the seafloor, the size of a fish, the presence of another whale, all sketched out in sound rather than light. It is a way of seeing with the ears, of feeling out the darkness with echoes, and it works so well that a sperm whale can hunt in the pitch black of the deep ocean, a kilometer or more down, with no light whatsoever, and still find and catch its prey with perfect precision, guided entirely by sound. There is even a special layer, deep in the ocean, where sound behaves in an almost magical way. At a certain depth, the conditions are just right that sound, instead of spreading out and fading, becomes trapped, channeled, held within that layer, so that a sound made there can travel across an entire ocean basin, from one side of the world to the other, before it dies away. Whales, it's thought, may use this deep sound channel to call to one another across staggering distances, their voices carried thousands of kilometers through the dark. Imagine that, 2 great creatures, an ocean apart, speaking to each other through the deep water, their low calls crossing the whole sea to be heard. So as we descend now into the true darkness, remember that it is not a silent place at all. It is filled with sound, with the clicks of hunting whales, the long songs of the giants, the calls carrying for miles through the black water. The deep is dark to the eyes, yes, but it is bright and busy and full of voices to the ears. And with that in mind, let us sink below the last of the light into the region of eternal night. We have been sinking slowly all this while, and now we pass below 1,000 meters, and we cross a great and final threshold. For here, the very last, faintest glimmer of sunlight finally gives out completely, and we enter a realm of total, absolute, permanent darkness. Scientists call it the midnight zone, and the name is perfect. For here it is always midnight, a midnight that has no dawn, that has lasted, unbroken, for as long as there has been an ocean. From here on down, no ray of sunlight has ever reached, not once, in all the history of the world. The only light in this vast realm is the living light the creatures make themselves. The midnight zone is enormous. It stretches from 1,000 meters down to around 4,000 meters, and it makes up a huge portion of the entire ocean by volume. A vast, black, cold expanse of water, far larger than all the sunlit and twilight waters above it. It is one of the biggest single living spaces on the whole planet, and it is a hard place to live. There is no light. It is intensely cold, hovering just a few degrees above freezing. There is very little food, for we are now far below the sunlit surface, and only that gentle marine snow, thinner and thinner the deeper we go, drifts down to feed the creatures here. And the pressure, well, we'll come to the pressure in just a moment, for it is a wonder all its own. And yet, even here, in the eternal cold and dark, there is life. Strange, patient, wonderful life. The creatures of the midnight zone are among the most alien and remarkable animals on Earth, shaped by their harsh, dark home into forms that seem almost too strange to be real. Because food is so scarce down here, many of them have learned to eat whatever they can find, whenever they can find it. And so, a great many have enormous mouths and long, fearsome-looking teeth, all the better to seize any rare passing meal and never let it go. Some can swallow prey larger than themselves, their stomachs stretching to hold a meal that might have to last them a very long time. When you might not eat again for weeks or months, you learn to make the most of every mouthful. Here you would find the anglerfish we spoke of earlier, hanging patiently in the black water, its little glowing lure bobbing gently before its cavernous mouth, waiting, endlessly patient, for something to draw near. The anglerfish keeps one of the ocean's strangest secrets too. In some kinds, the female is many times larger than the male, and the tiny male, when he finally finds a female in all that vast darkness, no small feat, attaches himself to her side and simply never lets go, becoming a small permanent part of her, so the two need never lose each other again in the dark. It is a strange arrangement. But then, when partners are so few and so far apart in all that blackness, perhaps it makes a certain sense never to let go once you've found one. And here, too, drift the most delicate creatures imaginable, soft, gelatinous beings, gentle and translucent, like living jelly, pulsing slowly through the black water, jellyfish and their relatives, and countless other soft, transparent things, drifting like ghosts. Many are nearly invisible, clear as glass, which is its own kind of camouflage in a world where a hunter might carry a light. The midnight zone is a place of slow motion and patience and strangeness, a vast dark gallery of some of the most extraordinary living things anywhere on Earth, all going quietly about their lives, a kilometer and more beneath the waves, in a darkness we can barely imagine. And now, before we sink deeper still, let us face the great invisible force that shapes this entire world, the crushing weight of the water itself. There is a force in the deep ocean that we have not yet spoken of, an invisible one, and it is perhaps the most powerful and relentless of them all. It is pressure, the sheer, crushing weight of the water itself. And to understand the deep and the astonishing creatures that live there, we have to understand this quiet, invisible force and the gentle truth of how life survives it. Here is the idea, as simply as I can put it. Water is heavy. A single bucket of it is surprisingly heavy to lift. Now imagine not a bucket, but a column of water kilometers tall, all of it pressing down. As you descend into the ocean, all the water above you presses down upon you, and the deeper you go, the more water there is stacked overhead, and so the greater the pressure grows. It builds steadily, relentlessly, the whole way down. By the time you reach the deepest parts of the ocean, the pressure is almost beyond imagining. The weight of the water pressing in from every side is hundreds and hundreds of times greater than the gentle pressure of the air we live in at the surface. Down at the very bottom of the deepest trench, the pressure is so immense that it is like having the weight of a great many cars pressing down on every single small patch of your body, all at once, from every direction. To us and to our machines, this is a deadly force. It would crush an ordinary submarine like a tin can. The few vessels that have carried human beings down to the very deepest places have needed walls of enormous thickness and strength, built like the toughest armor just to hold back that terrible squeezing weight. To send a person safely down into the deep ocean is, in its way, every bit as difficult and dangerous as sending them up into space. It is one of the harshest environments anywhere that human beings have ever tried to go. And yet, here is the gentle wonder of it. The creatures of the deep live in this crushing pressure quite happily, feeling nothing at all. A fragile, delicate, soft-bodied fish drifts calmly through pressures that would flatten a steel machine in an instant, and it doesn't even notice. How can this be? The answer is beautifully simple. That deep-sea fish is not crushed by the pressure for the very same reason that the water around it is not crushed. It is because the creature, like the water, is itself made mostly of water and of other soft, watery substances, and water simply cannot be squeezed. You can push on water as hard as you like, and it will not shrink. It just pushes back evenly from every side. So as long as a creature has no pockets of air inside it, no hollow spaces to be crushed, the great pressure of the deep presses on it equally from all directions, inside and out, and it feels nothing at all. It is perfectly, gently balanced against the weight of the sea. This is why the fish of the deep tend to be soft and slow and jelly-like, with no air inside them. They have quietly given up the hollow spaces that shallow water fish use to float and become creatures of pure soft flesh and water, in perfect balance with the crushing world around them. It is only when we try to bring one of these deep creatures up to the surface, into our world of gentle pressure, that things go wrong, and the poor thing, so perfectly suited to the deep, cannot survive the change. Down there, in its dark and heavy home, it is entirely at peace. There is something rather lovely in that, I think, that even the most crushing force in all the ocean is, to the creatures born to it, simply the gentle, familiar weight of home, and it points us toward the strange and wonderful shapes that life has taken in order to thrive down here in the dark. The creatures of the deep ocean are, without a doubt, among the strangest looking beings anywhere on earth. If you were to see them for the first time, many would seem almost unbelievable, like creatures dreamed up for a story. But every strange feature they possess, every odd shape and peculiar part, is there for a reason. each one a gentle solution to the hard problem of living in a world with no light, little food, bitter cold, and crushing weight. To look closely at a deep-sea creature is to read a quiet story of how life adapts to almost anything. Take their eyes for a start. In the dim twilight zone, where a faint glow still trickles down, many creatures have grown enormous eyes, great dark orbs, far too big for their bodies, designed to catch every last scrap of that precious faint light. But go deeper, into the true darkness of the midnight zone, and something curious happens. Here, where there is no sunlight at all to see by, some creatures have gone the other way entirely, and their eyes have shrunk, or nearly vanished. For what use are eyes in a world of total black? Better to spend the body's precious energy elsewhere. And so, the deep is home both to creatures with the largest eyes imaginable and to creatures with almost no eyes at all, each perfectly suited to the exact amount of light in its own particular layer of the sea. Then there are the mouths and the teeth. Because food is so scarce and so rare in the deep, and a meal might come along only once in a great while, many deep-sea creatures are built, above all else, to never miss a chance to eat. And so we find fish with mouths that seem far too large for their bodies, gaping and cavernous, lined with long, needle-like, inward-curving teeth, so that anything unlucky enough to be caught can never wriggle free. We find fish whose jaws can unhinge and stretch, and whose stomachs can balloon out to many times their normal size, so that they can swallow a meal larger than themselves and hold it, digesting it slowly, making it last. When you do not know when your next meal will come, you learn to seize everyone and to carry it with you. And then there is the matter of moving slowly and living slowly, down in the cold and the dark, where food is so scarce. Energy is precious beyond measure, and so many deep-sea creatures have learned to do everything at a gentle, unhurried, dreamlike pace. They drift rather than dart. They wait rather than chase. Their whole lives run slow. Their hearts beat slowly. They grow slowly. They age slowly. Everything about them is calm and patient and unhurried. A life lived in slow motion in the quiet dark. It is, in a way, a very restful way to live, to hang gently in the cold water, moving as little as possible, waiting with endless patience for whatever the deep might bring. You will also find down here bodies that are soft and translucent, clear as glass, so that a creature is all but invisible in the black water. You'll find long, trailing, delicate forms, and gently pulsing bells, and creatures that seem to be made of little more than water and light. Every one of them is a small marvel of gentle engineering, a living answer to the question of how to survive in one of the harshest places on earth. And they answer it not with strength or speed or armor, for the most part, but with softness and patience and light and slowness. There is a quiet lesson in that, perhaps, as we drift toward sleep, that even in the hardest of places, life finds a way, not by fighting the darkness, but by gently, patiently adapting to it. And now, let us leave the open water at last, and sink all the way down to the very floor of the sea. Down we go now, sinking past 4,000 meters, and at last, after our long, slow fall through the dark, we reach the floor of the deep ocean. And here we find one of the largest and least known landscapes anywhere on our entire planet, the abyssal plains. These are the vast, flat, muddy expanses that cover the deep ocean floor, stretching on and on across the bottom of the sea, in the cold and the perfect dark. And they are enormous. The abyssal plains are, in fact, among the flattest and largest surfaces anywhere on Earth. Great smooth muddy plains that spread out for thousands upon thousands of kilometers, covering a huge fraction of the whole planet's surface. They are the single biggest habitat for life on Earth, and almost no one has ever seen them. If you could somehow stand on the abyssal plain and shine a light around, and only a light we brought with us would do it, for it is utterly black down here, you would see a soft, gently rolling landscape of pale mud and ooze, stretching away flat in every direction into the dark. That mud is made, in large part, of all that marine snow, all those countless flecks of falling life from the world far above, settled down here over millions of years into a soft, deep carpet on the ocean floor. It is a still, quiet, patient place. The abyssal plain, cold, dark, and almost unimaginably vast. A silent, muddy desert at the bottom of the world. And it is not lifeless, though life here is sparse and spread thin, and lives at the very slowest of paces. Delicate sea creatures drift and crawl across the mud, soft sea cucumbers, ploughing gently through the ooze, sifting it for the tiny scraps of food it holds, curious fish that stand on long thin fins like stilts, propped up above the mud, facing patiently into the faint currents, waiting for a morsel to drift by. Strange and beautiful things live down here, going about their slow lives in the dark, feeding on the thin, ceaseless rain of snow from above. It is a hard, hungry, patient existence, life on the abyssal plain, a life of waiting in the cold and the dark for the gentle snow to fall. But every so often, into this quiet, hungry world, there falls a great and sudden gift. Far above, in the sunlit waters, one of the ocean's giants comes to the end of its long life. A great whale, dying of old age, its huge body slowly sinking down and down, through all the layers we have traveled tonight, until at last it comes to rest, gently, upon the abyssal plain. And when it does, it brings with it a feast beyond anything the deep has seen in years. A vast, sudden abundance of food, dropped into a world of scarcity. Scientists call this a whalefall, and it is one of the most wonderful things in all the deep sea. For a whalefall is not just a meal, it becomes a whole world. Within hours, creatures begin to gather from across the dark plain, drawn from far and wide to this unimaginable bounty. First the scavengers, the hungry fish, and the swarming little shrimp-like creatures feasting on the flesh. Then, over the months and years that follow, other creatures come and settle and make their homes there until the fallen whale becomes a bustling little island of life on the empty plain, an oasis in the desert, teeming and thriving. There are even special worms, found almost nowhere else, that live only on the bones of fallen whales, quietly dissolving them for the richness within. A single whalefall can support this thriving little community of life for decades. Years upon years of abundance, all from one great creature's gentle final gift to the deep. There is something profoundly beautiful in that, I think, that even in death the great whale gives life, sinking down into the dark to become, for years to come, a warm and crowded haven at the bottom of the cold and silent sea. And from these vast plains, the ocean floor drops away, in a few rare places, into the very deepest pits of all. we have come a very long way down. But there are a few places in the ocean that plunge deeper still, far deeper, down past even the vast abyssal plains, into the very deepest wounds in the surface of the earth. These are the ocean trenches, long, narrow, staggeringly deep canyons in the seafloor, where the bottom drops away into the greatest depths anywhere on the planet. Scientists call this deepest realm the hadal zone, named after the old idea of the underworld, for it is as deep and as remote and as unreachable as any place could be. It reaches from around 6,000 meters all the way down to the very bottom of the sea, at nearly 11,000 meters below the waves. The deepest of all these trenches lies in the western Pacific Ocean, and it is called the Mariana Trench. And at the very bottom of the Mariana Trench is a spot known as the Challenger Deep, the single deepest known point in all the world's oceans, the lowest place on the entire surface of the Earth. It lies nearly 11 kilometers down, around 10,900 meters below the waves. To picture it, remember what we said earlier. If you could take Mount Everest, the highest mountain on Earth, and sink it into the Challenger Deep, the whole mountain would vanish, and its peak would still lie more than 2 kilometers beneath the surface. It is a depth almost impossible for the mind to hold. And it is one of the most remote and difficult places for a human being to reach anywhere on Earth. The story of how we first got there is a remarkable one. For most of history, the deepest sea was thought to be entirely beyond us. Then, more than 60 years ago, 2 brave men climbed into a tiny, immensely strong steel chamber and had themselves lowered slowly into the Mariana Trench, sinking for nearly 5 hours down through the black, watching the depth gauge tick down and down, until at last they gently touched the very bottom of the world. They stayed only a short while, stirred up a soft cloud of pale mud, and then began the long climb back up. And then, remarkably, no one returned to the very bottom for more than half a century. Only in recent years has it been reached again, by a small number of explorers in tiny submarines. Even today, only a few dozen people in all of history have ever seen the deepest point of the ocean with their own eyes. For much of the time since human beings first stood upon the moon, more people had walked on the moon than had ever reached the bottom of our own sea. The deepest sea, in some ways, is as hard to reach as another world. And what is down there, at the very bottom, in that crushing, freezing, eternal dark? For a long time, people assumed that nothing could possibly live in such a place, that the pressure alone would forbid all life. But they were wrong. Even here, at the very deepest point in the ocean, in pressures that would crush a submarine, there is life. Small, pale, delicate creatures make their homes in the deepest trenches. There are little shrimp-like scavengers swarming in surprising numbers, feeding on whatever drifts down. And there are fish, pale, soft, gentle little fish, ghostly and almost translucent, that drift calmly through the deepest waters. In fact, the deepest fish ever seen was filmed just recently, drifting quietly along in one of these great trenches more than 8 kilometers down. A small, pale, delicate thing, entirely at home in a place that would destroy almost anything we could build. Scientists believe that fish simply cannot live much deeper than that somewhere around 8 kilometers down, the pressure finally becomes too great even for their soft and clever bodies. So these gentle little trench fish live right at the very edge of where life itself can hold on, at the deepest frontier of the living world. It is a humbling thought, to end our downward journey here, at the very bottom of everything, in the most remote, most crushing, most impossibly hostile place on the entire surface of the earth, a place darker and colder and more forbidding than we can easily imagine. Life, gentle and patient and soft, has still, somehow, found a way to be. And that gives us, perhaps, the perfect place from which to look at one of the deep ocean's greatest wonders of all, a place where life thrives not on sunlight at all, but on the heat and chemistry of the earth itself. I told you, at the very beginning of our journey, that nearly all life in the ocean depends, in the end, upon the sun, upon those tiny plants at the sunlit surface, turning sunlight into food, feeding everything below. And for a very long time, scientists believed that this was true without exception, that all life, everywhere, ultimately traced back to the sun's light. But then, not so very long ago, deep beneath the sea, they discovered something that overturned that belief entirely. One of the most astonishing discoveries in the whole history of science. They found whole thriving worlds of life living in the deep, in total darkness, that do not depend upon the sun at all. Here is how it happens. In certain places on the deep ocean floor, especially where the great plates of the Earth's crust meet and pull apart, seawater seeps down into cracks in the seafloor, deep into the hot rock below, where it is heated to scalding temperatures and charged with minerals and chemicals from within the earth. And then this hot, mineral-rich water comes gushing back up out of the seafloor, through tall chimneys of rock, in great billowing plumes. These are the hydrothermal vents, and some of them, blackened with minerals, are called black smokers, for they pour out what looks like dark smoke into the water, though it is really superheated, mineral-laden water rising up from the depths of the earth. The water coming out is astonishingly hot, hot enough to melt some metals, and yet, because of the immense pressure down there, it does not boil. It simply pours out, dark and shimmering, into the freezing black water all around. And gathered around these vents, in the total darkness of the deep sea floor, thousands of meters down, there lives a garden of the strangest and most wonderful creatures imaginable, a bustling, crowded oasis of life, blooming in the black. There are great forests of giant tube worms, taller than a person, standing in swaying clusters around the vents, tipped with brilliant red plumes. There are ghostly white crabs and pale shrimp swarming in their thousands, and clams and mussels the size of dinner plates. It is a riot of life, a dense and thriving community, crowded around these chimneys of hot water in the middle of the vast, empty, cold, dark plain. An impossible garden, blooming in the deepest night. But how? What could all this life possibly be feeding on, so far below the reach of the sun, so far from the sunlit world above? And here is the wonder of it, the discovery that changed how we understand life itself. This whole thriving world does not run on sunlight at all. It runs on chemistry. At the base of it all are tiny living things, bacteria, which have the remarkable ability to take the chemicals gushing out of the vents, the minerals from deep within the earth, and turn them directly into food and energy, with no sunlight needed whatsoever. Where the plants at the surface drink sunlight, these deep bacteria, in effect, drink chemicals from the earth's own interior. They are the green pasture of the vents, except that they need no green and no sun. And everything else, the giant tube worms, which have no mouth and no stomach at all, but keep these bacteria living inside their own bodies and are fed by them. The crabs, the shrimp, the clams, everything, in the end, depends upon those chemical-eating bacteria, and thus upon the heat and the chemistry of the living earth, rather than upon the distant sun. This was a profound discovery, and it changed our sense of what life is and where it can be. It showed us that life does not need the sun after all, that given only heat and water and the right chemicals, life can arise and thrive in total darkness at the bottom of the sea. Some scientists even wonder whether life on Earth might have first begun in a place like this, in the warmth and chemistry of a deep-sea vent, rather than in some sunny pool at the surface. And it gives us hope too, that life might exist elsewhere in the cosmos, in the dark oceans thought to lie beneath the icy crusts of distant moons, far from any warming star, all from these strange, hot, blooming gardens deep beneath our own sea. And speaking of the ocean's great wonders, let us now rise up just a little and think about its most magnificent inhabitants of all, the giants of the deep. The deep ocean is a world of mostly small and delicate creatures, as we have seen, soft, patient, gentle little beings, drifting in the dark. But it is also home to some of the very largest and most magnificent animals that have ever existed anywhere on Earth. Creatures of truly enormous size, moving through the deep water like living submarines. And there is something wonderfully calming about the giants of the deep. For all their great size, they are, for the most part, slow and gentle and unhurried, gliding through the vast dark sea. Let us begin with a creature of legend, the giant squid. For centuries, sailors told tales of enormous sea monsters with grasping arms, rising from the deep to seize their ships, and for a long time these were dismissed as pure myth. But the giant squid is entirely real. It is a vast creature, with a long torpedo-shaped body and great trailing arms and tentacles that can stretch all together to something like 10 or 12 meters in length, or even more, as long as a bus. It has the largest eyes of very nearly any creature on Earth, each one as big as a dinner plate, the better to gather what little light there is in the deep. And it lives down in the dark, hundreds and hundreds of meters below the surface, so that, for all its great size, almost no one has ever seen a living one. It was only quite recently that a living giant squid was ever filmed at all, drifting in its deep, dark home. It is a genuine sea monster, and it is real, and it glides quietly through the deep water this very night. And there is a creature even larger and stranger still, a cousin of the giant squid that lives in the cold, dark waters near the very bottom of the world, which is heavier and bulkier even than its famous relative, with the largest eyes of any animal that has ever lived. Eyes the size of dinner plates indeed, perhaps the largest eyes nature has ever made. These great squid, drifting through the deep, are among the most mysterious large animals on the entire planet, so rarely seen that almost everything about their lives remains unknown to us. But the giant squid, for all its size, is not the master of the deep, for it is hunted, down in the dark, by a creature larger still, the sperm whale. The sperm whale is the largest toothed predator that has ever lived, an enormous creature with a great square head, and it is the deepest diving of all the great whales. It hunts the giant squid in their own deep, dark home, plunging down, a kilometer or more into the blackness, holding its breath for an hour or more at a time, using its clicks of sound to find its enormous prey in the pitch dark, and doing battle with the giant squid far below the reach of any light. We know that these great struggles happen deep in the dark, because we find the round scars of the squid suckers on the skin of the sperm whales, silent evidence of titanic battles fought in the black depths that no human eye has ever witnessed. Imagine that. Two of the largest creatures on Earth locked together in the darkness a kilometre down, in a struggle that no one will ever see. And drifting through the upper waters above all this are the greatest creatures of all, the great whales, the largest animals ever to have lived on our planet, larger even than the mightiest dinosaurs. The very biggest of them is longer than 3 buses placed end to end, and its heart alone is the size of a small car. And yet, for all their staggering size, these greatest of giants are gentle, peaceful creatures, gliding slowly through the sea, feeding on some of the very smallest life in the ocean, and singing their long, slow songs to one another across the deep. There is no better image, perhaps, to soothe you towards sleep than that. A great gentle giant, longer than a row of buses, drifting slowly and peacefully through the deep blue water, singing softly into the vast and quiet sea. There is one more quality of the deep ocean that I would like to share with you before we begin our long journey back toward the surface. And it is perhaps the most soothing of all. For the deep sea is not only dark and cold and vast, it is also a place of extraordinary slowness and of great age. In the cold and the dark and the quiet of the deep, time itself seems to run more slowly, and the creatures that live there live long, unhurried lives, some of them almost unimaginably long. We spoke earlier of how the cold and the scarcity of the deep led its creatures to live slowly, moving little, growing gradually, saving their precious energy. And one consequence of all that slowness is that many deep sea and cold water creatures live for a very, very long time, far longer than the creatures of the warm and busy surface world. In the cold deep, life is not in a hurry, and so it lasts. Consider the Greenland shark, a large, slow, gentle shark that cruises through the cold, deep waters of the far north, moving so unhurriedly through the frigid dark that it is one of the slowest swimming sharks in all the sea. These sharks grow only a tiny amount each year, and they take a very long time to reach their full size and to grow old. Just how old? Scientists studying them made an astonishing discovery. The Greenland shark, it turns out, is the longest-lived creature with a backbone anywhere on Earth. These sharks can live for hundreds of years, very likely as long as 3 or 4 centuries. Think about that, slowly, as you rest. There are Greenland sharks swimming quietly through the cold northern deep this very night that were already alive, already gliding through the dark water, hundreds of years ago, long before your grandparents, or their grandparents, were ever born. A creature that has been cruising slowly through the cold sea, calm and patient, since before the modern world existed. It is a living piece of history drifting silently through the deep. And it is not only the sharks. Down in the cold deep, there are gentle coral gardens, for corals are not only creatures of the warm, shallow reefs. There are cold water corals too, growing slowly in the deep dark, thousands of meters down. And these deep corals, growing just the tiniest fraction of an inch each year, can be astonishingly, breathtakingly old, some of them thousands of years old, living things that were already growing, slowly and quietly, when the great ancient civilizations of the world were only just beginning. A single deep-sea coral might be older than the pyramids. There are creatures on the deep sea floor tonight that have been alive, quietly growing in the dark for longer than all of recorded human history. There is something profoundly peaceful in this, I find. The deep ocean as a place where time slows almost to stillness, where creatures live for centuries and millennia, patient and calm and unhurried, in the cold and the quiet and the dark. It is a kind of gentle eternity down there, a world where nothing rushes, where the pace of life is slow beyond our imagining. And after the noise and hurry of our own days at the surface, there is real comfort in knowing that such a place exists, a vast, slow, ancient, patient world, resting quietly at the bottom of the sea. But this vast, slow ocean does far more than simply exist. It quietly keeps the whole of our world alive. And that is where we turn, as we begin, at last, to rise. As we begin our slow, gentle drift back up toward the surface, I want to share with you something about the ocean that is easy to forget, living as we do on the dry land. And that is just how much this vast body of water quietly does for all of us, every single day. The ocean is not merely a beautiful and mysterious wilderness, full of strange creatures. It is also, in a very real sense, the great engine that keeps our whole planet gentle and alive. Without it, life on land, including our own, simply could not go on as it does. Let us start with something as simple and as essential as the very air you are breathing right now, softly, as you rest. We tend to imagine that all our oxygen, the air that fills our lungs, comes from the forests and the trees, the great green lungs of the land. And the forests do give us a great deal of it. But so does the ocean, every bit as much, and perhaps even more. Remember those tiny plant-like plankton drifting in their countless trillions in the sunlit surface waters. As they drink in sunlight to grow, they release oxygen into the water and the air, just as trees do, and they release an enormous amount of it. By many estimates, around half of all the oxygen on Earth, something like every second breath you take, comes not from the forests at all, but from those tiny, invisible plants adrift in the surface of the sea. So as you breathe now, slowly and gently, remember that the ocean is breathing with you, that the very air in your lungs is, in part, a gift from the quiet green pastures of the sea. The ocean does something else for us too, something quieter and just as vital. It gently steadies the temperature of the whole world. Water is wonderfully good at soaking up heat and holding on to it, and the vast ocean absorbs a tremendous amount of the sun's warmth. And then, through great slow currents, enormous rivers of water that flow through the sea, carrying warm water from the hot tropics toward the cold poles and cool water back again. The ocean spreads that warmth all around the planet, evening out the temperatures, softening the extremes. These great ocean currents are like a vast, slow, planet-wide circulation, a gentle heartbeat of moving water that carries warmth around the globe and keeps our climate mild and livable. Without the ocean's patient shuffling of heat from place to place, our world would be a far harsher place, the hot parts far hotter, the cold parts far colder, the whole planet less gentle and less kind to life. The ocean does one more quiet, enormous service for us, besides. It is the great sponge of our world, soaking up not only heat, but also a vast amount of the carbon dioxide that would otherwise gather in the air, drinking it down into the water and storing it away in the deep. Over recent times, the ocean has quietly absorbed the great majority of the extra heat that has built up around our world. and a large share of the carbon besides, gently softening changes that would otherwise be far more sudden and severe. It is a patient buffer, a vast slow cushion, absorbing the shocks and keeping the whole delicate balance of our world far steadier than it would otherwise be. We owe it more than we can easily say, and the ocean is patient and generous and quiet in all of this. It absorbs, it stores, it circulates, it breathes, asking nothing in return, doing its great slow work whether we notice it or not. Every mild day, every gentle rain, every breath of fresh air is in some part a quiet gift from the sea. The whole living surface of our planet, every forest and field, every creature of the land, every one of us, rests, in a sense, upon the broad, calm shoulders of the ocean, held in a gentle balance that this great body of water has quietly maintained for billions of years. I find that a deeply comforting thing to rest on as we rise back toward the light. That vast, dark, mysterious deep we have been journeying through tonight is not some cold and separate world, indifferent to us. It is the great, quiet, patient guardian of all life on earth, the source of our air, the keeper of our climate, the gentle engine at the heart of our world. We are children of the ocean, every one of us, whether we ever set foot in it or not. And it holds us and breathes with us and keeps us all through the day and all through the night. We are nearly back to the surface now, rising up through the brightening water, our long journey into the deep almost done. And as we come up into the light, I would like to leave you with what is, to me, the single most wonderful thing about the deep ocean of all. And it is this, that after everything we have seen tonight, we have really only just begun to know it. The deep sea remains, to this very day, the greatest unexplored wilderness left anywhere on the face of the earth. It is our own planet's last great frontier. We often think of exploration as something belonging to the past, as though all the great unknown places have already been found and mapped and understood, as though there is nothing left to discover. And we look outward, to distant planets and far-off stars, as the only frontiers left. But the truth is that one of the greatest unexplored places in the entire cosmos is right here, beneath the waves of our own world. Remember what we said at the very beginning, that the vast majority of the deep sea floor has never been mapped in detail, and that human beings have laid eyes on only the very tiniest sliver of it. A fraction so small it is almost impossible to believe. There is more of the deep ocean floor that no eye has ever seen than there is that we have ever glimpsed. Our own sea, covering most of our own planet, is very nearly as unknown to us as the surface of a distant world. And because it is so unexplored, the deep ocean is still constantly surprising us. Every time we send a vessel down into the dark, every single expedition, without fail, we find things we have never seen before. New creatures, strange and beautiful, entirely unknown to science. New landscapes, new communities of life, new wonders. Scientists who study the deep sea say that they discover new kinds of creatures on very nearly every voyage they make. That the deep is so full of unknown life that we are nowhere close to having found it all, and likely never will be. There may be great creatures down there, even now, that we have never seen and never named, drifting quietly through the dark. The deep ocean is not a closed book, its story fully told. It is a book we have only just cracked open, most of its pages still blank and waiting. How do we explore it, this vast and hostile dark, very carefully and with great difficulty, for it is one of the hardest places anywhere to reach. We send down small, immensely strong submarines, carrying a few brave people sealed inside, or, more often now, robot explorers, machines on long tethers, or free swimming on their own, carrying lights and cameras down into the black to be our eyes, where we ourselves cannot easily go. Slowly, patiently, expedition by expedition, we are beginning to map the dark, to shine our small lights into the great unknown, and to bring back glimpses of the wonders below. But it is slow work, and the ocean is vast, and it will be a very long time indeed, many lifetimes perhaps, before we truly know the deep sea as we know the land. And there is something rather beautiful in that, I think, something hopeful and even peaceful. We live in an age that can feel as though everything is known, everything is mapped, everything is figured out and settled. And yet here, beneath the waves of our own blue world, lies a wilderness as vast and as mysterious and as full of undiscovered wonders as anything our distant ancestors ever dreamed of. The age of exploration is not over. The greatest unexplored place on Earth is still out there, still waiting, still keeping its secrets, right here beneath the surface of the sea. And who knows what marvels are still down there in the dark tonight, drifting quietly through the deep, waiting patiently to be found. And so, gently, we rise the last of the way, up through the brightening blue, up out of the cold and the dark, and we break the surface at last, back into the warm night air, our long, slow journey into the deep now complete. Let us rest here for a moment, at the surface, beneath the stars, and gather up all that we have seen, softly, as the night settles around us and sleep draws near. We began at the bright and sunlit surface, in the warm, familiar waters where the light still reaches, where the great green pastures of the sea feed nearly all the life below. And then we sank down, slowly, through the fading blue of the twilight zone, where billions of creatures rise and fall each day and night in the greatest migration on Earth. We passed through waters lit only by living light, where most creatures carry their own soft lanterns in the dark. We drifted down into the eternal midnight, past strange, patient creatures with enormous eyes and gaping mouths, through pressures that would crush a machine yet trouble the soft creatures of the deep not at all. We came at last to the vast muddy plains at the bottom, and the sudden feasts of the whale falls, and the deepest trenches of all, where gentle little fish drift at the very edge of where life can hold on. We found impossible gardens of life blooming around hot vents in the total dark, fed not by the sun, but by the earth itself. We passed the great gentle giants and the ancient slow creatures who have lived for centuries in the cold. And we remembered, as we rose, that this vast dark ocean is the quiet guardian of all life on Earth, the source of our very air. What a place it is, the deep ocean. What a strange, vast, beautiful, and almost entirely unknown world, hidden right here beneath the surface of our own blue planet. And here is the thought I would like to leave you with, as you drift now towards sleep. All the while we have been talking, all through this long and gentle journey, that great dark ocean has been out there, real and vast and endlessly deep, going quietly about its ancient business. The snow softly falling, the creatures gently glowing, the great whales singing across the deep, the slow currents circling the world, exactly as they have for millions upon millions of years, and exactly as they will go on doing tonight, and every night, whether we are watching or not. There is a deep and gentle comfort in that such a vast, calm, patient, wondrous world exists and endures, whether we see it or not. So let the thought of it carry you down now, softly, into sleep, down through the warm blue water, past the gently glowing creatures, into the deep, quiet, patient dark, where nothing rushes and all is calm. You are safe, and you are warm, and the great ocean is breathing gently all around the world, keeping its slow and ancient watch. Thank you truly for drifting all this way down into the deep with me and back again. Wherever you are on this beautiful blue world, whatever tomorrow may bring, I hope you feel just now wonderfully calm and gently held, like a small soft creature drifting in the quiet deep. Rest easy now. The tide will rise and fall, slow and certain, all through the night. Sleep well.